All right, our next guest is a one-man science experiment, a philosopher of pain and amazement. Most of us, we scream when we step on a Lego. This guy swallows razor blades for fun. Let's welcome the human mystery box himself, the great David Blaine. How are you, David?
Hey, Gentry, nice to meet you. By the way, I also scream if I step on a Lego piece. So
Seriously?
There.
That's wild. It's hard to believe when I see you playing with fire and having bees all over your face. Man, what a wild show, this new show you have, Do Not Attempt. I watched every minute of the first two episodes last night on National Geographic. It's been quite a ride. It's got to be a lot of work, man. You traveled all over the world.
It's been an incredible 3-year journey meeting some of the most fascinating people that I would only read about as a kid, that I've been so lucky to get a crash course and a glimpse into their world. But back to where you started with the Lego piece, about 10 years ago, I had a bunch of magicians come over and they sat in my studio and they knew me. They were new magicians to what I do. So they knew me from my big stunts. And as you said, trying a certain characteristic, which they consider me to be so serious and like pretty deadpan. And a little bug, not cockroaches, because I was never afraid, but a little bug showed up out of nowhere, and I screamed and jumped, and they all thought I was kidding. But that's the actual me, and what this series shows is that side of me, which is like me reacting to their magic. So normally I'm showing the other side where I do the magic and I let people react, but this is they're doing their skills that I consider to be the closest thing to real magic that's possible. And then I'm the one reacting, screaming, running away, laughing, crying, and all of the above. So the series takes that entire idea of what you would normally assume and reverses the whole thing.
I don't think I've ever met anybody who has such a strong sense of wonder like you do, David. Where does this magic mind come from? What happened to you, David, that has you doing things that nobody ever would dream of doing or want to do?
Well, I think just growing up, becoming a magician at the age of 5, playing with cards and reading lots of books, because that's how you learned back in the day. There was no YouTube and nothing like that. I found these incredible stories about first Harry Houdini and then these incredible people that he wrote about in a book called Miracle Mongers and their methods that had these unique abilities to endure fire. They could turn themselves into a human aquarium. They could do all these crazy feats. Coal eaters, stone eaters, all these people with amazing skills I was obsessed with. And then I would go to Coney Island and I'd see the guys doing the sword song and I would watch the magicians doing their thing and I was fascinated. And I just kept working on magic and I kept reading books, I kept studying. And then Ricky Jay wrote a book called Learned Pigs and Fireproof Women about all these fascinating people it is mind over body that I'm fascinated with. It's people that push themselves for thousands of hours to do something that most people would never want to do or would ever try doing. And then to me, that's the magic, because there's no way that it seems like this could be possible. There was a woman, a day boost practitioner, who was a grandmother in Indonesia. And she learned how to eat real razor blades. She chews up the razor blades and swallows them. And I never even knew this was possible. I never even heard of it. But the way she found this skill set was because Harry Houdini did an act where he would eat razor blades and then eat strings, and then he'd pull the razor blades out all connected to a string, and he would do that with needles as well. And when she saw him do that, she suddenly came up with her own version, and she started to eat real razor blades. So it's like you never know what little thing is going to trigger somebody to do something that they make unique to them, and that's what's been the highlight of making this series.
Our guest, David Blaine, he has a new residency coming up in Las Vegas at Encore, so make sure you make plans to go see him. Also, set your TV to watch David Blaine's new show, Do Not Attempt. It's now streaming on National Geographic, Disney Plus, and Hulu. David, when you're about to do something that pushes these edges of human limits, what's the internal dialogue? Are you visualizing the pain? Are you blocking it out, or do you lean into it? What is the actual mindset behind performing something that looks impossible like you do?
Well, I mean, so if it's something that I'm doing on my own, then there's a very slow learning curve, and I figure it out bit by bit. But on this series, I had to trust the masters in front of me, and I did. So I would watch them So the beginning was observation. I would watch what they do, and then I said, oh, is that possible? How are they doing that? How could they learn that? Is there any way that somebody else could do that? But the impetus for the show was that if something is done by one, it can be done by others. So I wanted to travel around the world to meet these incredible people with these amazing skills and get a crash course into what they were doing. Now, they're masters, so when they do it, it looks like magic. When I do it, you kind of understand, whoa, what these people are doing is insane. But when they do it, you don't even think about that. You're just like blown away that they're actually able to dance in the air like a hummingbird, or they're able to do these, breath holds under ice and stand upside down in sub-zero Arctic temperatures and make it look like a dance. So again, it's been an incredible experience. But then there was a guy, Maestro Ligerino, who I met in Rocinha in Rio de Janeiro, and he's able to take a serrated steak knife and push it into his nasal cavity, up into his nose. And that one, was really, nobody should try any of these things, but that one, he gave me his secrets and he explained it to me, and I carefully followed exactly what he said and was able to do that one. So it's a combination of all of those things.
Yeah,
lots of stuff like
the show is called Do Not Attempt, children. So please do not attempt these things, but make sure that you watch them. Is there a moment while you guys were filming where something maybe didn't go as planned and unpredictability became the magic itself? Was there one stunt that did not go the way you had planned?
There was so many injuries across the board. I mean, even if you look at my story highlights on my Instagram, and there's one there called Do Not Attempt. If you click through the pictures, the third one is the bees. So I was swarmed by 100,000+ bees, and each arm you could see the results of being stung. And you have to remain perfectly calm because you don't want the hive mentality. You don't want them to all attack because you can't endure that much venom. But there was lots of moments in there where things did go wrong. Many of them didn't make the series, by the way, like trying things that were really dangerous and stuff like that. Even with the masters and the people walking me through it, there's always some margin for error, of course. So we did have a great safety team. We had ambulances on standby. When I was learning how to kiss a king cobra, we were right in the beginning. We were right next to a hospital. So I didn't just jump into things and say, let's just see what happens. It was a very constructed, thought out process. And it was 3 years, by the way, of filming this.
I've heard you say that the toughest stunt that you ever did was being frozen alive, and somewhere around the 55th hour, you began to go crazy. You were seeing things. Can you describe that moment? And now that you went and did these last 3 years, is that still the toughest thing that you've ever done, frozen alive?
Just from an endurance point of view, I think the frozen time was the most difficult. But just from a fear and, like being able to override something that is very counterintuitive to the brain. On this series, when I was in South Africa, I was in the KwaZulu-Natal, and there's a man named Neville who lost a leg from a snake-related injury and has gone into a coma 2 times, and he sits with black mambas, 6 of them specifically when I was there, in a small enclosure, just to show people that if a black mamba, which is the deadliest snake in all of Africa, comes into your school or into your home, if you attack it or you try to get a broom and swipe it away, it will attack you or you will hurt it. But either way, the outcome is most likely going to be bad. But whereas the right thing to do is remain perfectly calm. So I trusted him, and I jumped into this, I carefully stepped into this enclosure with him where I was with 6 black mambas, and I just remained perfectly still and sat next to him there and listened carefully. But at one point, he said, "Don't worry if it," and as it was coming towards us, he says, "If it goes after you, I'll take the hit." And right when he said that, my heart rate jumped through the roof, and I was like, "Get me out of here now!" But I couldn't leave because you can't leave until they lose interest in you. So I had to wait until he said I could go. But that was intense.
Now, David, you're a dad, so I'm curious, how has fatherhood changed your view of this danger and risk and the stunts that you're willing to do? Is this something that maybe your daughter was concerned? Did she come along on this journey with you?
Yeah, I spoke to her about everything, and I was very, I was like, if she didn't feel that it was ready, then I would take time off and I would come back and I would do it. So I had that flexibility. So I was I did anything that I felt like there could be a real risk. I discussed it thoroughly with her and made her feel comfortable. And if she didn't, then I wouldn't do it.
When you're constantly chasing this extreme adrenaline like you do, David, how do you come down and enjoy like the simple things in life? Can you even sit through a movie without like craving danger and wanting to eat nails with your popcorn?
No, I mean, even right now when I'm speaking to you, I'm holding a deck of cards. So I think part of my meditative process is like practicing and working with cards, and I'm always outperforming, and that's a constant that doesn't vary in my life. And then my time off, I spend just being a full-time dad, which is like the dream. So I divide my life between being a full-time dad and then going off and doing these things that I love. But if I didn't do them, I would be sad. So it's kind of a balance between the both.
I'd like to go back to that frozen in time. You're at the 55th hour and you said that your mind started going crazy. Do you believe you were seeing the light? Like, do you believe that you may have actually passed over for a moment, or what were you seeing?
I can tell you exactly what that moment was, and it was exactly 55 hours. The stunt was 63 hours. There was 8 hours left, and I remember what happened was the ice wasn't against my skin. It was probably 8 inches away. So it was like an igloo, I thought, and it was a warm November. So the air being pumped through was 68 degrees. So it was causing those drops to keep hitting me, but that was fine. But what happened was, as I got to the 55-hour mark, it started to become more and more difficult, started to crash down on me. And I looked out through the ice, and don't forget, the ice was very distorted. So it was like weird to look out at the crowd of people in that distortion, right? It's already messing with your brain. And I asked somebody, what time is it? Like, I couldn't talk, so I pointed to my wrist, what time is it? And he looked at me and went 4:02 or whatever it was. And I waited for a few more hours. What felt like, I think I waited for like 4 hours. And I looked out and I did the same thing. I pointed to my wrist, meaning, what time is it? And the person said 4:04. And I realized that those hours it was actually only 2 minutes, and it felt like 4 hours. And as soon as I realized that, my brain just cracked, and then everything became hallucinations and scary. And then the crowd there and the people around me there, they knew I was out of my mind. So they were like, get him out. So they all started chanting, get him out. But I wanted to make it till the end. And my one person I spoke to before, I said, don't take me out unless it's the worst case scenario. So he was in charge, so he let me stay. But even when they tried to put the chainsaw through the ice to cut a hole for me to come out, I didn't even know it was a chainsaw, and I kept trying to grab at it. So I was really delusional and out of my mind, hallucinating, because your brain wants to go to sleep. So your brain tries to fool you and present your worst nightmares while you're awake in order to fool you. And I had to learn how to override that part of my brain, which has been a constant learning curve, which is like using the mind to overcome the body or your natural impulses. And that's kind of like been something that I've been, I think that's part of like the stuff that I love, which is what these people do across the board on the series as well.
And I have one final question for you. I know you're getting ready for your Encore Vegas residency. You put on a great show. I've been to some of your shows. It's amazing. So I'm curious, what's the greatest show you've ever seen? Because if something amazes David Blaine, it's got to be a pretty damn good show.
There was a show that I saw in New York called Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk. And it was with Savian Glover, and it was directed by George Wolfe, and it was mind-blowing. It took us through a history of tap dance, but it led us through the culture and the whole, everything that drove dance to become what it was today, from the history to the great characters to the people now to Savian. And then it was, I don't know if I saw that show between 11 to 20 times. I would go see it myself. I would go, and that for me was one of the greatest shows done on Broadway ever. So that was my favorite show. But then there's also the Cirque du Soleil shows, of course. And the Steer show was incredible that I saw many years ago in Vegas at Treasure Island. And then the O show that's now going on. So these are all my favorite shows. And they're always usually based on somebody that's like, or performers that are doing these unique acts to me that look like, that give you an arc of like you forget where time and place and where you are. And yeah, that's my favorite stuff.
And this show will do that for you. Check it out. David Blaine, Do Not Attempt, now streaming on National Geographic, Disney Plus, and Hulu. He's the magician who dances with danger. David, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be seeing you in Vegas at the Encore.
Oh, thank you. and I look forward to seeing you. Thanks for having me.